Hey guys, hello and welcome to Naveed for Speed. In today's video, I am going to be walking around and I'm going to be driving the Nissan Ariya. Now, the Nissan Ariya is Nissan's second electric vehicle after the Nissan Leaf. And we all know that the Nissan Leaf was hugely important into the transition to electric vehicles. So this is their second electric vehicle and it's a crossover. So let's see exactly what it's like and how good it is. The Ariya is Nissan's practical zero-emissions SUV. It comes with a decent amount of tech and a desirable interior. Pricing is competitive too. In 2022, the Ariya won the Car of the Year award at the Auto Express Awards, and more recently has been named the UK's best car for long distances at the Auto Trader New Car Awards 2024. So what's the Ariya like then? So before I take this car out to drive, I'm going to show you around the exterior, I'm going to show you around the interior and talk a little bit about practicality, and then I'll show you exactly what it feels like to drive. But if we start on the exterior and we talk about the styling, one of the most controversial points about the Nissan Ariya is that front end, this sort of grille area which is now fully blacked out with this gloss black finish. It's not to everybody's taste. I know people that really like the styling of this car. I know people that don't like the front end of this car. I'm undecided a little bit. The more I spend time with it, the more I look at it, the more I start to like it. But it definitely looks better in person than it does on pictures. Now, the front end might not be to everybody's taste, but the rest of the car is so exquisite that it makes you forget about the front of the car. As we move towards the side of the car, you can certainly see that sort of crossover profile, especially with the sloping roofline at the back. It gives it a bit of more of a coupe look. You get black wheel arches and black trim along the side skirts, and you also get, on this particular spec vehicle, you get 20-inch alloy wheels, and they have these sort of aerodynamic covers on the wheels. I don't know exactly how good it is for cooling the brakes, but it certainly is better for the aerodynamics. What you see happening there is the car is locking and unlocking itself, because I have the key in my pocket, and every time I approach the car it unlocks itself, and after a short while it will lock itself. It is quite convenient to have the key in your pocket and not have to unlock and lock the car. Inside as well, you get keyless start as well. Moving towards the back of the car, now this is where it gets quite interesting. As far as exterior styling goes, the back of the car is probably one of the strongest points, I think. You get this roof spoiler, which looks really good. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the spoiler that you get on an Aston Martin DBX with this sort of middle feature over here. It looks really cool. You get the Nissan logo behind this sort of glass finish, and you get a floating light bar, which I think looks really cool. You also get this automatic tailgate, which you can use simply by moving your foot around. That's a load of cloth that I used to wipe the car before I video it. But the good thing about this car is, once you get all your groceries, once you get all your luggage out and your hands are full, you could just do the same thing and the boot closes itself as well. Now, quite often that never really works for me when I'm using my foot to open the boot, but on this particular car, I've never got it wrong. It works every single time. Aside from that, on the exterior front, this car comes with an optional extra paint which is called ceramic grey, and I think it looks amazing. In this particular colour, it just looks so good. So the outside of the Nissan Ariya is pretty cool, especially with that ceramic grey paint. But it's the inside where the Ariya really excels. The inside is so nice, it's really premium. I'm in the Evolved spec. Now you can get the car in Engage spec, which is the very basic spec. You can get it in the Advanced spec, which is sort of the one to go for, or you could go for the Evolve spec. Now this particular car, the Evolve spec, comes with this blue leather, and you get this sort of blue Alcantara soft touch material all over the cabin. I think it looks really good. As soon as I got in the car, the first time I saw this interior, I was really impressed. And you also get a load of other materials around the car. You get sort of this bronze finish that runs along the dashboard and around the center console and certain features of the car. You get the sort of bronze stitching in the steering wheel. We'll start with the steering wheel actually. So the steering wheel comes as a 2-spoke steering wheel. Reminds me a little bit of the steering wheel in the BMW iX, and it comes with this sort of flat bottom, and I really like the design of a flat bottom steering wheel. It's got this sort of slightly perforated feel, so you can really grip onto it really well. It's really good to use. The seats are really comfortable, cushion you really well. A little bit on the tighter side, but they're really supportive. Reminds me a little bit about when I drove the BYD Seal. Those seats were really cushiony, and it's the same case with this particular car. And I'll explain how that affects the ride when you're driving, because this car is a little bit on the softer side, especially compared to competitors like the Ford Mustang Mach-E. If you haven't already seen my video on the Mustang Mach-E, click the link up here and you can watch that video as well. The rest of the car, really cool. You get some climate control capacitive buttons on the dashboard here, and they're not the best to use because you don't know if they're touch screen or you sort of have to press them, and but they do the job and they're separate from the touchscreen. Now the touchscreen infotainment system, you get a 12.3-inch screen in the center, and you get a 12.3-inch screen for your instrument cluster, for your driver's display, and they both sort of blend into one another. It reminds me a little bit of Mercedes systems that you get. But the good thing that I like about this system is the two screens, because they're separated in the middle, you don't get obstructed by the steering wheel, where normally you wouldn't be able to see what's in the middle of the screen. You get both screens separate, and you can then see what's on your driver display, and you can see what's on your infotainment system. The infotainment system is actually really quite responsive. I was really impressed by it. I thought it would be a little bit laggy, but no, it's actually really good. The one thing that I don't like is that if you do want to get the full climate control system, you do have to press the button here on the touchscreen and get that up. But again, you have these sort of little shortcuts on these capacitive buttons. Talking about these capacitive buttons, on the center console you get similar capacitive buttons for your drive modes. Now I'm not a big fan of that, because it means that I always have to take my eye off the driving to look down at the drive mode buttons to change those, or e-pedal mode, whatever mode. I don't like that, because I like to be able to just, whilst I'm driving, just without looking, just move the buttons, but you have to look down, so that's not a big plus point. But talking about the center console, you get 2 cup holders here, which you can close and open, and you could take this sort of centerpiece out and you can have one big cup holder in the middle too, so that's pretty cool. You also get wireless charging under here, so you can leave your phone there and it can charge, and it's out of sight, it's out the way, it's not going to be distracting you from driving. But the downside of that is sometimes you might forget your phone in there when you leave the car, and I have done that already, so that's something to watch out for. Now you might be wondering, you don't get any storage here in the center console, so where is your storage? Well, you simply press this button here and you get this little storage bin that comes out of here, which you can use to store stuff in, and it has the table at the top, which you can put your phone, you could put a laptop, you could put an iPad, and you can work whilst the car is charging. So that's a really cool feature. I've been using that actually quite a lot. I've propped up my phone on it to watch stuff, other YouTube videos, etc. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I quite like that. And you can open and close it using this button over here. You get a glove box on the passenger side, in front of the passenger seat. Not the biggest, but you get loads of storage elsewhere. Door bins are reasonable size. You can actually put big bottles of water in the door bin, so that's really good. Lots of light, you might have noticed, in this cabin, because you've got this sort of glass roof, which you can open and close the blinds using this button over here. Now that will affect the headroom in the back for the rear passengers, but as far as room and space goes here in the front, really good. You've got loads of headroom. I still have a reasonable amount of headroom, leg room, great driving position. Same with the back, the rear passengers. I'll tell you about the leg room in the back. Other than that, I mean, because you don't have a transmission tunnel in the middle, you can sort of put your feet across as well. And you can press this button over here and you can move this center console all the way back to give you even more room. And then that exposes the some more charger ports down here, so that's really cool. Now, one party trick that I want to tell you about this car, which is really cool, is the interior mirror, the rear view mirror. So you're driving along the road, you're looking into the rear view mirror, and you're getting blinded by cars behind you. What do you normally do? You normally flick the mirror like this and it dims the rear view for you. You don't get blinded by cars. With this particular car, once you flick the mirror, you get this really cool camera, rear-facing camera, which you can then customize to whatever height you want. You can face it in whatever direction you want. You can change the brightness of it. That's pretty cool. It's the best of both worlds, because if you don't want to use a camera, which you don't always want to use a camera, you can flick it back and you get a mirror. So that's really cool. Aside from that, you get electronically adjustable seats, which have the memory function in both the driver and the passenger side. So overall, as far as that comfort experience goes, there's so much customization that you can do. You can move the center console forward and back. You can move your seats forward and back. You can use heated seats. In this particular spec, you get ventilated seats. You get a heated steering wheel. You get everything that you need to make this experience pleasant for you. And that should hopefully translate into a very good driving experience. So I'll show you a bit more about the practicality in the back of the car, and then we'll take it out to drive. Rear passenger space in the Nissan Ariya is actually pretty good. Nissan have used a Japanese concept to try and create as much space as they can and package the car really well. So even though this car does have that sloping roofline effect, you still get plenty of room back here, especially headroom. Now you got to remember, the car that I'm in has the panoramic sunroof as well, which usually robs headroom, but I've got some headroom, and I really thought that my head would be touching this ceiling. So that's pretty good. Legroom, I've got plenty of legroom, and you can fit 3 passengers in really well without compromising space for the middle passenger in their feet, because you don't have a transmission tunnel, which you do get on the equivalent Volvo, because that's based on the internal combustion engine version of the car. At the back, you get, it's sort of, the door sills are sort of medium to high height, so smaller passengers, the children, might not have a great view out of the back, and it is slightly tinted windows back here. But in terms of light and in terms of space, it's really good. You get charging ports in the front here, you get climate control back here as well, including heated seats, rear heated seats in this Evolve version. So what is it like to drive the Nissan Ariya? Well, the first impressions are on the subject of comfort. Now, I'll start with the driving position. So the driving position is really quite great. It's higher up. You get a commanding position of a view of the road. You can actually see over other cars, which is really good. In terms of the seats are really comfortable and they cushion you really well. The seating position in terms of the armrest and where you're resting your arms, you've got the armrest, the center armrest is slightly higher than the armrest on the door side. Now, I thought this would be higher, so you can just sort of sit, whilst you sit there, you can sort of put your hand, you can lean your arm and you can hold onto the steering wheel, but it's really quite low, which does make it a little bit awkward. But generally, you're going to be driving with at least one, hopefully 2 hands on the steering wheel, so that shouldn't be much of a problem. If you do want to, you could sort of use the door sill, the window sill over here. In terms of comfort, the suspension, now the suspension is quite soft compared to some of its rivals, especially the Mustang Mach-E and the Audi Q4 e-tron. It goes over bumps a little bit on the bouncy side. Now, that's something which I prefer, because I don't want my suspension to be too firm, especially a car that I'm going to be driving quite often, especially a car that I'm going to be driving around the city where there's potholes and there's bumps and there's all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's the best car to go over bumps and go over potholes, but it does make life a little bit more comfortable, especially compared to some of those rivals. In terms of how does it feel to drive as an electric car? Well, it's not, it doesn't feel as electric as you might think. Now, what I mean by that is you still get that instant acceleration, that instant torque, and the car can accelerate, especially in this particular spec. You get 0 to 62 miles per hour comes in 5.1 seconds, and that's because this particular car is the E-Force version. So the E-Force, what do we mean by E-Force? So E-Force is Nissan's electric 4-wheel drive system. It has an electric motor over the front axle and it has an electric motor over the back axle, and it can use that electric motor to send torque to whichever wheels need it most and to brake whichever wheels need it most, especially when going into corners. Talking about corners, the way the car leans, now I have found this car to lean quite a fair bit. It is a tall car. So just be wary of that when you're driving the car around corners. It does feel like it leans quite a lot, but I suppose that should mean that you get grip whenever you need it, especially on the outer wheels that it leans onto. So I know I mentioned that this car does not feel like a typical electric car, and what I mean by that is I'm talking about the braking. So in an electric car, typically what will happen is as soon as you start to put pressure on the brake pedal, you start to get regenerative braking, and you kind of can't really judge the braking distance really well. You kind of don't feel like you're connected to the brake pedal, and so you have to apply more pressure, and that's when you actually start to brake, and you can actually bring the car to you can slow it down, or you can bring the car to a stop. Now you don't seem to get anything like that with this particular car. It does have regenerative braking, but as soon as you start to apply pressure onto the brake, you can immediately get a good feeling of that brake, and you can immediately judge your speed really well. And I think that's what surprised me the most when it came to this car. As soon as I started to drive the car, and as soon as I started to press the brake, I thought that it would have that weird feeling, and I would have to apply a lot more pressure onto the brake, but I'm really quite impressed with that braking feeling. And in terms of the driving experience, in terms of how it feels to drive on a bit of a twisty, a bit of a bendy road like this, is actually quite fun, especially with that electric power, that instant torque that you get. No matter what speed you're at, you can put your foot down on the accelerator and you will just take off. This car does come fitted with the optional sports pack, so that's pretty cool as well. Now, when it comes to the performance of this car, this particular car is the 87 kilowatt hour battery version. So you do get a bigger battery, which means you get more range. In your smaller battery version, you get around over 330 miles of range, and then because this is it has the larger battery, you get even less range. And then because it has the motor at the front and the motor at the back, because it's a four-wheel drive version, you get even less range. So in general, you're not sacrificing a lot of range, because what you end up with is 310 miles of range. Now, in the real world, that's going to be closer to 250 miles. And I've been seeing a decent amount of range. I thought that I would have more range anxiety when I got into this car, but I've not had to charge this car for several days now, and I've been commuting to and from other cities, so that's pretty good. I don't feel that range anxiety, and it has been cold. The weather's been cold as well, so with that in mind, I thought that I would have to be charging the car more often. It would be less efficient in the weather, but I think the car does really well to maximize the amount of miles that you get from it, so I think that's really good. That is because this particular car comes fitted as standard with a heat pump, so that means that you can get more a longer range. When we compare this car to some of its rivals, like the Tesla Model Y, like the Polestar 2 and the Mustang Mach-E, this car actually feels like it's great value, because it costs a lot less than it, and stuff like the heat pump come as standard. The car costs, this particular version, which is the E-Force version, so it's a four-wheel drive version, and it's the Evolve spec, so it's the top spec as well. This particular car comes in at around £55,000. The entry-level Engage version, that starts at around £40,000, so that's where it's competitive with cars like the Skoda Enyaq. But if you compare it to cars like the Tesla Model Y, and if you compare it against cars like the Mustang Mach-E, it's definitely good value. This is definitely a car to consider if you are thinking about buying a crossover electric vehicle. In terms of the styling, interior styling, I think this has the best styling of all those cars. I think cars nowadays, particularly with the Teslas and the Mustangs, the Mustang Mach-E, you get it's just big screen in the middle, and that's it. There's no other feature of the car in the interior. This interior is exquisite. It's got the wood dash, it's got the soft touch Alcantara. It really is quite good. I think as far as the interior goes, no other car comes close to this car. Nissans are usually quite reliable anyway. The car's scored 5 stars in the NCAP rating. It's got all the sort of safety features that you need, including your lane keep assist, your lane departure warning. It's even got rear cross traffic monitoring. It can automatically brake for you going forward and going backwards. It can brake for you as well. So if you're coming out of a spot and a car comes past, or if you're coming out of a parking spot and you've got pedestrians walking past, the car can actually brake for you. It has some sort of assistant as well that keeps coming off, that keeps talking to me whilst I'm trying to make this video as well. So it's got loads of great features, and I think the customized
voice recognition.
Yes, please. I think some of the features of the car that you can use make life a lot easier, and I think overall the car is one that you should definitely consider. Thanks for watching. If you like the Nissan Ariya, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and be sure to check out some of my other videos, and of course consider subscribing to my channel.